The notification sound from her phone cut through the silence of Sofia Martinez's minimalist downtown Chicago apartment like a blade. She glanced at the screen while stirring her homemade butternut squash soup, a recipe she'd perfected during countless lonely evenings. What she saw made her hand freeze mid-stir. It was a group photo on Instagram. Her entire family gathered around the mahogany dining table at her parents' suburban Oak Park home. The same table where she'd sat every Sunday for 26 years, listening to her older brother Carlos boast about his latest real estate deal, while her younger sister Elena showed off photos from her European honeymoon. There was her father, Roberto, raising a glass of his favorite Malbec. Her mother, Carmen, beaming as she presented what looked like her famous tres leches cake. Her aunts, uncles, and cousins filled every chair except the one that should have been hers. Sofia's throat tightened as she read the caption. Family Sunday dinner. Nothing beats Carmen's cooking and being surrounded by the people who matter most. Family first, blessed, Sunday tradition, the people who matter most. The words echoed in her mind like a slap across the face. She set her phone down with trembling fingers and walked to her floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River. The city lights blurred as tears welled up in her eyes. How had she not known about this dinner? She'd been checking her phone all day, as she always did on Sundays, waiting for the usual text from her mother. Mija, dinner at 6. Don't be late. But there had been no text, no call, no invitation. Sofia sank onto her gray velvet couch, pulling a throw pillow against her chest. The apartment felt enormous and suffocating at the same time. She'd bought this place 6 months ago after her tech startup, Green Thumb, an app connecting urban dwellers with local organic farmers, had secured its third round of funding. The success had been intoxicating. Forbes had featured her in their 30 Under 30 list. TechCrunch had called her the future of sustainable commerce. Venture capitalists were practically throwing money at her. But none of that mattered when your own family forgot you existed. She scrolled through more photos, each one feeling like another twist of the knife. There was Carlos cutting into what looked like prime rib, his wife Lisa laughing at something their 8-year-old son had said. Elena was showing off her new Cartier watch, a gift from her husband's family, no doubt. Everyone looked so happy, so complete, so perfectly fine without her. Her phone rang, jolting her from her spiral. The caller ID showed Mom, and for a split second, Sofia's heart leaped. Maybe there had been a mistake. Maybe they'd realized their error and were calling to apologize. Hola, Mommy, Sofia answered, trying to keep her voice steady. Sofia, Mija, how are you? I was just thinking about you. The casual tone made Sofia's chest burn. Really? Because it looks like you were thinking about everyone else today. There was a pause. What do you mean, honey? The family dinner, Mom? The one I apparently wasn't invited to. Another pause, longer this time. Sofia could hear the television in the background, probably her father watching his Sunday night soccer match. Oh, Mija, that was just a small gathering. Very last minute. Carlos suggested it because Lisa's parents were in town, and you know how busy you are with your company. Too busy for my own family? That's not what I meant. We just didn't want to bother you. You're always working, always stressed about something with your business. Sofia stood up abruptly, pacing to her kitchen island. Mom, I haven't missed a Sunday dinner in 2 years, not one. Even when I was in Silicon Valley meeting with investors, I flew back Saturday night to be there. I know. But this was different. It was really just for Lisa's parents, and there were 20 people there, Mom. I saw the pictures. Tia Rosa was there. Primo Miguel flew in from Miami. This wasn't about Lisa's parents. Carmen's sigh came through the phone like static. Sofia, you're being dramatic. It was one dinner. Dramatic. The word that had followed Sofia her entire life whenever she dared to express hurt or disappointment. Dramatic when she cried after Carlos won the science fair with a project she'd helped him design. Dramatic when she graduated valedictorian, and her parents missed the ceremony for Elena's quinceañera planning. Dramatic when she landed her first job at Google, and they spent the celebration dinner talking about Carlos's new house. "You're right, Mom," Sophia said quietly. "It was just one dinner, the one that showed me exactly where I stand in this family. Mija, don't be like this. I have to go. I have work to do." Sophia hung up before her mother could respond. She stared at her phone, waiting for it to ring again, hoping her mother would call back and fight for her, apologize, make this right somehow. The phone remained silent. She walked to her home office, a sleek space with exposed brick walls and a standing desk she'd had custom made. Her laptop screen showed her latest app metrics. Green Thumb had processed over 50,000 orders this month, connecting urban families with fresh, locally sourced produce. Her users loved her. The press loved her. Investors loved her. But her own family couldn't even remember to invite her to dinner. Sophia opened her laptop and dove into work, the same way she'd been doing for years whenever the loneliness became too much. She reviewed market analysis reports, responded to investor emails, and planned the next quarter's expansion strategy. The numbers were incredible. They were on track to hit $20 million in revenue by year's end. Around midnight, she finally closed her laptop and headed to bed. But sleep didn't come easily. She lay in her king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every family gathering from the past few years, looking for signs she'd missed, clues that she'd been slowly edged out of the inner circle. The signs had been there. Conversations that stopped when she entered the room. Inside jokes she wasn't part of. Group texts she wasn't added to. She'd attributed it to jealousy about her success, or simple oversight. But tonight's exclusion wasn't an oversight. It was deliberate. Her phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, hope flickered in her chest. Maybe it was Carlos or Elena, apologizing for the oversight. Instead, it was her business partner, David Chen, sending screenshots of their latest App Store reviews. All 5 stars. Customers raving about how Green Thumb had changed their lives, connected them with their community, made healthy eating accessible and affordable. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd built a business around bringing people together, creating connections, building community. Yet she couldn't even secure a place at her own family's table. Sophia set her phone on the nightstand and finally drifted off to sleep, her dreams filled with empty chairs and tables set for everyone but her. The next morning brought a cascade of notifications. Her investor relations manager had scheduled 3 back-to-back meetings with potential international partners. Her marketing team had prepared a presentation for a major retailer expansion. Her assistant had lined up interviews with 2 food and lifestyle magazines. Success, it seemed, waited for no one, not even heartbreak. But as Sophia showered and prepared for another 18-hour workday, she couldn't shake the image of that empty chair, the chair that should have been hers, at the table where she'd grown up, surrounded by the people who were supposed to love her unconditionally, the people who matter most. The words still stung, but now they carried a different meaning. Maybe it was time to find out who really mattered, and more importantly, maybe it was time to start mattering to herself. 3 weeks after the dinner that never was, Sophia's life had become a whirlwind of vindication and success. She threw herself into work with the intensity of someone trying to outrun their own thoughts, and the results were staggering. "Sophia, you need to see this." David burst into her office, his laptop balanced precariously on a stack of market research reports. His usually calm demeanor was replaced by barely contained excitement. "Whole Foods just agreed to our terms. Full integration across all their Chicago and Milwaukee locations, with expansion to the entire Midwest region if we hit our 6-month targets." Sophia looked up from her dual-monitor setup, where she'd been simultaneously reviewing supply chain, logistics and coding improvements to their recommendation algorithm. Dark circles under her eyes betrayed the 16-hour days she'd been pulling, but her smile was genuine. "What about the margin requirements?" she asked. leaning back in her ergonomic chair. They agreed to our pricing structure. No compromises. Sophia, this is huge. We're talking about potential revenue increase of 40% in the next quarter alone. She stood up and walked to the window wall of her office, watching the afternoon Chicago traffic crawl along Lakeshore Drive. Success should have felt overwhelming, intoxicating. Instead, it felt like armor. Each achievement, another layer of protection against the hurt that still sat in her chest like a stone. Set up a call with the regional managers, she said. I want to personally oversee the rollout and get Maria on the line about expanding our farmer network. We'll need at least 30 new suppliers to handle this volume. David nodded, making notes on his phone. You know, maybe you should take a day off to celebrate. When's the last time you did something just for fun? Sophia turned back to him, eyebrow raised. Fun is watching our user acquisition numbers climb. Fun is knowing we're about to revolutionize how millions of people eat. That's not fun, Sophia. That's obsession. The word hung in the air between them. David had been her business partner for 3 years, her friend for longer than that. He was one of the few people who could call her out without consequences. Maybe obsession is what it takes, she said quietly. Maybe that's the only thing that doesn't let you down. Before David could respond, Sophia's phone rang. The caller ID made her freeze. Carlos, brother. She hadn't spoken to any family member since that painful conversation with her mother. Her finger hovered over the decline button, but curiosity won out. Hello, Carlos. Sophia. Hey, little sister. How's the tech mogul doing? His voice carried that forced cheerfulness she remembered from childhood. The tone he used when he wanted something but was trying to ease into it. I'm fine. What do you need? Need? Can't I just call to check on my sister? I heard about the Whole Foods deal. That's incredible. Sophia walked back to her desk, motioning for David to stay. Something about Carlos's tone set off alarm bells. How did you hear about Whole Foods? We haven't announced it yet. Oh, you know how it is. Word gets around in business circles. I'm really proud of you, Sophia. We all are. We all are. The same we that had gathered for dinner without her 3 weeks ago. Is there something you want, Carlos? I have a conference call in 10 minutes. There was a pause, and when Carlos spoke again, the fake cheerfulness had dimmed slightly. Actually, yeah. I was hoping we could meet for coffee. There's something I'd like to discuss with you. A business opportunity. Sophia's stomach clenched. What kind of business opportunity? It's better discussed in person. How about that place? On Michigan Avenue, you like? Tomorrow at 2? Sophia glanced at her calendar. She had 3 meetings scheduled for tomorrow afternoon, including a crucial investor check-in. But something in her brother's voice, a hint of desperation beneath the casual tone, made her curious. Fine. 2 o'clock, but I only have 30 minutes. Perfect. Thanks, Sophia. I really appreciate. She hung up before he could finish, staring at her phone with a mixture of dread and anticipation. Family drama? David asked gently. When is it ever anything else? Sophia muttered, turning back to her computer. Come on, let's prep for the Whole Foods integration meeting. I want to make sure we're ready to scale fast. The rest of the day passed in a blur of strategic planning and system optimization. Sophia's team worked with the efficiency of a Formula One pit crew, each person handling their specialized tasks while she orchestrated the overall strategy. By 8 p.m., they had a comprehensive rollout plan that would position Green Thumb as the premier farm-to-table app in the Midwest. Boss, you're going to burn out if you keep this up, said Jennifer, her head of marketing, as the team finally started packing up for the night. I'll rest when we're the biggest food app in the country, Sophia replied. But she was already thinking about tomorrow's meeting with Carlos. What could he possibly want? And why now, after 3 weeks of silence? That night, Sophia ordered Thai, food from her favorite delivery app. The irony of using a competitor's service while building her own food platform wasn't lost on her, and settled onto her couch with her laptop. She had every intention of reviewing the quarterly reports, but instead found herself scrolling through social media. More family photos. Carlos and Lisa at their son's soccer game. Elena and her husband at some charity gala, looking like they'd stepped out of a magazine. Her parents at their weekly church service, surrounded by other couples their age. Everyone living their lives, completely unaffected by her absence. Sophia closed her laptop and headed to bed early for once, but her mind raced with possibilities about tomorrow's meeting. Business opportunity, Carlos had said. In her experience, when family members approached successful relatives about business opportunities, it usually meant one thing: they needed money. The next afternoon, Sophia arrived at the coffee shop 5 minutes early, a habit she'd developed in her corporate days that served her well as an entrepreneur. She chose a corner table with a view of the entrance and ordered her usual, a double espresso with oat milk. Carlos arrived exactly on time, looking every inch the successful real estate developer in his tailored navy suit and Italian leather shoes. But Sophia noticed the details her brother probably hoped she'd miss. The slight tension around his eyes, the way he checked his phone twice while walking to her table, the fact that his usual confidence seemed a shade too bright. "Sophia!" He leaned down to hug her, and she stiffened slightly. "You look amazing. Success suits you." "Thank you." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit. Tell me about this business opportunity." Carlos ordered a black coffee and settled into his seat, his smile faltering for just a moment, always straight to the point. "I've missed that about you." "Have you?" "Because I got the impression the family was doing just fine without me." The words came out sharper than she'd intended, but Sophia didn't apologize. She was tired of making other people comfortable with their bad behavior. Carlos had the grace to look uncomfortable. "About that dinner. Look, Sophia, it wasn't personal. Mom didn't think you'd be interested in dealing with Lisa's parents, and—" "Stop." Sophia held up her hand. "I didn't come here to relitigate family dinner politics. You said you had a business opportunity to discuss." Carlos nodded, pulling out his phone and scrolling to what looked like a presentation. "Right. Okay. So you know I've been running Martinez Properties for the past 8 years. Sophia nodded. Carlos had taken over their uncle's real estate development company after college, focusing on luxury residential projects in Chicago's growing neighborhoods. Business has been incredible. We've completed 12 major developments, including that mixed-use project in Lincoln Park that got featured in Architectural Digest. We're sitting on contracts worth $40 million. Congratulations. Sophia's tone was neutral, but internally she was already seeing the shape of what was coming. The thing is, Carlos continued, his practiced smile beginning to crack, we've hit a cash flow situation. Nothing major, just a timing issue with our financing. The bank is requiring additional collateral for our next project, this amazing opportunity in Wicker Park that could triple our annual revenue. There it was. Sophia sat back in her chair, studying her brother's face. How much? I'm sorry? How much do you need, Carlos? He shifted in his seat, pulling at his tie. It's not that simple. This is an investment opportunity, not a loan. You'd be a partner in the project, with full profit sharing and... How much? Carlos met her eyes for the first time since sitting down. $2 million. The number hung between them like a confession. Sophia felt a strange sense of vindication mixed with disappointment. She'd been right about his motives, but being right felt hollow. $2 million, she repeated. And you came to me because you're family. Because I know you're doing incredibly well. And this could be great for both of us. The profit margins on luxury residential development are insane, Sophia. You could double your investment in 18 months. Sophia took a sip of her espresso, watching her brother squirm. He'd always been the golden child, the one who got their father's attention, their mother's pride, the family business connections. Now he was sitting across from her, asking for her help. Does the family know you're here? She asked. Carlos's face flushed slightly. This is business, Sophia. It doesn't need to involve everyone, so that's a no. Look, what happened at that dinner? I know it hurt your feelings, but hurt my feelings? Sophia leaned forward, her voice low but intense. Carlos, I've attended every family function for 26 years. Every birthday, every holiday, every Sunday dinner. I've listened to everyone's problems, celebrated everyone's successes, and supported this family in every way I could. And when you all planned the biggest family gathering in months, I was the only person not invited. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. And now, 3 weeks later, you're sitting here asking me for $2 million like nothing happened. Carlos ran his hand through his hair, his composure finally cracking. Sophia, I'm in trouble. Real trouble. If I don't come up with this money in the next 30 days, I could lose everything. The company, the house, my son's private school. Lisa doesn't even know how bad it is. For a moment, Sophia saw past the polished exterior to the scared man underneath. This was her big brother, who'd taught her how to ride a bike and helped her with her calculus homework. The brother who'd been her hero before he became too busy for her, too important for her concerns. Why didn't you ask Elena? She said quietly. Elena doesn't have that kind of money. And Dad, you know Dad. He'd want to take over the company, make it about him. You're the only one who's successful enough and independent enough to help without strings attached. Sophia almost laughed at the irony. Independent enough to help, but not important enough to invite to dinner. I need time to think about it, she said, standing up. Sophia, wait. Carlos grabbed her wrist gently as she turned to leave. I know, I screwed up. We all did. But this is business. This is separate from family stuff. She looked down at his hand on her wrist, then back up at his face. No, Carlos, it's not separate. It's never separate. That's what I'm finally starting to understand. Sophia pulled her hand free and walked out of the coffee shop, leaving her brother sitting alone at the table with his empty promises and desperate needs. As she walked back to her office, Sophia's phone buzzed with notifications from her team. The Whole Foods integration was ahead of schedule. Their user base had grown by 15% in the past week. 3 more major retailers were requesting meetings. She was building an empire while her family empire crumbled around her. The poetic justice should have felt satisfying, but instead, it just felt lonely. Back in her office, Sophia stared out at the Chicago skyline and made a decision. She picked up her phone and called her accountant. Margaret, it's Sophia. I need you to run some numbers for me. How much liquid capital do I have available for investment? As Margaret ran through her portfolio, Sophia realized she had more than enough to help Carlos. The question wasn't whether she could afford to give him the money. The question was whether she could afford not to. The call came at 6:47 a.m. on a Thursday, while Sophia was in the middle of her morning workout routine in her building's private gym. She'd been pushing through a particularly challenging set of deadlifts when her phone lit up with Mom on the caller ID. Sophia set down the weights and wiped her hands on her towel before answering. Early morning calls from her mother usually meant one of 2 things. Someone was in the hospital, or someone needed something urgently. Mommy? What's wrong? Oh, Mija, thank God you answered. Carmen's voice was breathless, strained in a way that made Sophia's stomach clench. I need to see you today. Can you come to the house? What happened? Is Dad okay? Your father is fine. It's about Carlos and the family business. Sophia, I don't know what to do. The vulnerability in her mother's voice was jarring. Carmen? Martinez had always been the family's rock, the one who held everyone together through her husband's health scares, Elena's tumultuous teenage years, and every crisis in between. Hearing her sound lost and frightened made Sophia forget about their recent estrangement. I'll be there in an hour, Sophia said, already heading toward the locker rooms to shower and change. Thank you, Mija. Thank you so much. The drive to Oak Park took 45 minutes in morning traffic, giving Sophia too much time to think about what awaited her. She hadn't been to her childhood home since before the infamous dinner, and she wasn't sure what kind of reception she'd receive. The house looked exactly the same as always, a modest 2-story colonial with the meticulously maintained garden her father had spent decades perfecting. Sophia's old bedroom window still had the crack in the corner from when Carlos had accidentally thrown a baseball through it when she was 12. Carmen must have been watching for her because the front door opened before Sophia could knock. Her mother looked smaller somehow, more fragile than Sophia remembered. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she was wearing one of her old house dresses instead of her typical put-together outfit. "Mija," Carmen pulled Sophia into a tight hug that lasted longer than usual. "I'm so glad you came." "Of course I came. What's going on?" Carmen led her into the kitchen, where the familiar smell of café con leche and fresh bread should have been comforting. Instead, Sophia noticed the stack of papers scattered across the kitchen table. Official-looking documents with bank letterheads and legal terminology. "Sit, please," Carmen said, pouring Sophia a cup of coffee without asking. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen with an open heart." Sophia sat in her usual chair, the one that had been empty 3 weeks ago, and waited. "Carlos came to see your father and me yesterday," Carmen began, sitting across from her daughter. "He told us about his situation, the business troubles, the money he needs. Did he tell you he asked me for $2 million? Carmen's face crumpled slightly. "Yes, and he told us what you said, that you needed time to think about it." Sophia studied her mother's expression, looking for signs of the manipulation tactics she'd grown up with, the guilt trips, the emotional appeals, the subtle ways the family had always gotten her to do what they wanted. "Mom, if you called me here to convince me to give Carlos the money—" "No." Carmen's interruption was sharp, surprising. "No, that's not why I called you, Sophia. I called you because I finally understand what we've done to you." The words hung in the air like smoke. Sophia felt her defenses rise automatically. "What do you mean?" Carmen reached across the table and placed her weathered hand over Sophia's. "When Carlos told us about meeting with you, he was angry, frustrated that you didn't immediately agree to help. He started complaining about how you'd changed, how success had made you cold and selfish." Sophia tried to pull her hand away, but Carmen held on gently. "Your father agreed with him at first. They both started talking about how family should always come first, how you owed it to Carlos to help because he's your brother, and I sat there listening to them, and suddenly I heard what we've been saying to you your entire life." Carmen's eyes filled with tears. "We've trained you to be our safety net, haven't we? Every time something went wrong, every time someone needed something, we turned to Sophia, our responsible daughter, our successful daughter, our dependable daughter. But we never stopped to ask what you needed." Sophia felt her throat tighten. This wasn't the conversation she'd expected. "And then," Carmen continued, "your father said something that made me realize how badly we failed you. He said, 'Sophia will come around. She always does what's right for the family.' And I realized that we've never given you the choice not to. We've never treated your generosity like a gift. We've treated it like an obligation." The tears Sophia had been holding back for weeks finally started to fall. "Mommy, the dinner, Mija, that terrible dinner where we forgot to invite you. Do you know why it really happened?" Sophia shook her head, not trusting her voice. "Carlos suggested it because he said you'd been weird lately, too focused on work, too distant from the family. He thought a small gathering would be more relaxed without you there." The words hit Sophia like a physical blow. "I was too much work to include. Yes. And I agreed with him because I thought you were too busy anyway, too important now for our little family dinners. I convinced myself we were doing you a favor by not bothering you." Carmen's voice broke. "But the truth is, We were making room for everyone else's comfort at the expense of yours. Again. Sophia wiped her eyes with her free hand, trying to process everything her mother was saying. When I saw those pictures online afterward, I was so proud of how happy everyone looked. It wasn't until you called that I realized what we'd done. And even then, I didn't understand. I thought you were being dramatic because that's what I've always told myself when you've been hurt by our thoughtlessness. Mom, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Carmen squeezed Sophia's hand tighter. Because yesterday, when your brother and father were sitting here complaining about your reaction to Carlos's request, I finally heard what you've been trying to tell us for years. We don't see you as a person with your own feelings and needs. We see you as a resource to be managed and accessed when convenient. The kitchen fell silent, except for the ticking of the old clock on the wall. The same clock Sophia had watched during countless homework sessions and heart-to-heart talks with her mother over the years. Sophia, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Sophia nodded. How long have you felt like you don't really belong in this family? The question was so direct, so cutting, that Sophia almost gasped. No one had ever asked her that before. No one had ever acknowledged that the feeling might be real and valid. Since I was about 15, Sophia said quietly. Maybe longer. Carmen closed her eyes as if the answer physically hurt her. What happened when you were 15? The science fair. I spent months helping Carlos with his project on renewable energy. I did most of the research, helped him build the prototype, even wrote parts of his presentation. When he won first place, everyone celebrated him. And when I mentioned that I'd helped, Dad said I was trying to steal Carlos's thunder. Oh, mija. That's when I realized that my contributions only mattered when they made someone else look good. And if I ever wanted credit for my own work, I was being selfish or jealous. Carmen was crying now, tears streaming down her face. I remember that. I remember thinking you were being competitive with your brother instead of supportive. I've been trying to earn my place at this table my entire life, Sophia continued, the words flowing like water through a broken dam. Perfect grades, perfect job, perfect achievements. But none of it mattered because I was never the son who would carry on the family name or the daughter who needed taking care of. I was just useful. And now Carlos needs you to be useful. Again? Yes. And the terrible part is I probably would have helped him if he'd just asked honestly. If he'd acknowledged what happened at the dinner, apologized, and then explained his situation, I might have been willing to invest in his company. Carmen leaned back in her chair. But he didn't do that. No. He tried to pretend nothing had happened and make it seem like I'd be lucky to give him my money, like I should be grateful for the opportunity to save him. They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of 26 years of family dysfunction settling between them like dust. Finally, Carmen spoke. What do you need from us, Sophia? What would it take for you to feel like you truly belong in this family? The question was so unexpected, so hopeful, that Sophia almost started crying again. When was the last time someone had asked what she needed? I need you to see me, Sophia said simply. Not as a resource or a safety net or the responsible one who'll always be there to clean up everyone's messes. I need you to see me as a person who has feelings that can be hurt, dreams that matter, and a life that has value beyond what I can do for other people. How do we do that? Start by not expecting me to fix Carlos's problems. He made business decisions that put him in this position. He needs to find his own solutions, not come to his little sister with his hand out. Carmen nodded slowly. And what about the family dinners, the holidays? Invite me because you want me there, not because it's expected. Include me in planning instead of just expecting me to show up. And if I can't make it sometimes because of work or other commitments, don't make me feel guilty about having my own priorities. We can do that. Can you, though? Sophia met her mother's eyes directly. because it means treating me like an adult whose time and energy are valuable. It means accepting that my success isn't something that happened to me. It's something I worked for and earned. And it means that if you want my help with something, you need to ask respectfully, not assume I'll automatically say yes. Carmen was quiet for a long moment, processing everything Sophia had said. "What about Carlos?" she finally asked. "What do I tell him?" "Tell him that if he wants to discuss a real business partnership with clear terms and fair profit sharing, he can set up a meeting with me and my attorney. But if he just wants a family bailout, he needs to look elsewhere." He's going to be angry. "That's not my problem to solve anymore, Mom. Carlos is a grown man who made grown man decisions. If he's in trouble, he needs to figure out grown man solutions." Carmen stared at the papers scattered across the table. Bank statements and loan documents that painted a picture of Carlos's desperation. "I think," she said slowly, "you might be the only one in this family who really understands what it means to be an adult." Sophia reached across the table and took her mother's hand again. "I love you, Mommy. I love all of you, but I can't keep setting myself on fire to keep everyone else warm." "I know. And I'm sorry it took me so long to realize we've been asking you to do exactly that." As Sophia drove back to the city, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not the desperate hope that her family would finally see her value, but the quiet hope that came with finally seeing her own value clearly. Her phone rang as she pulled into her building's parking garage. The caller ID showed Carlos's name, and, for once, Sophia felt no anxiety about answering. "Hello, Carlos?" "Sophia, Mom told me you two talked today." His voice was tight with barely controlled anger. "I can't believe you're going to let family politics affect a legitimate business opportunity." "Is that what you think this is about? Politics? Isn't it? You're punishing me for that stupid dinner by refusing to help when I'm in real trouble." Sophia parked her car and sat in the quiet garage, collecting her thoughts. "Carlos, I'm going to say something, and I need you to really listen. This isn't about the dinner, although that was a symptom of a much bigger problem. This is about respect. I respect you. No, you don't. If you respected me, you would have approached me honestly about your financial troubles instead of trying to disguise a bailout as a business opportunity. If you respected me, you would have apologized for the dinner situation instead of trying to minimize it. And if you respected me, you wouldn't be calling me right now to argue about my decision instead of accepting it gracefully. So you're just going to let me lose everything? I'm going to let you figure out your own solutions to problems you created. That's what adults do, Carlos." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "You've changed, Sophia. Success has made you cold." Sophia felt the familiar stab of guilt, followed immediately by something new. Clarity. "You know what, Carlos? You're right. I have changed. I've learned that my kindness and generosity are gifts, not obligations. And I've learned that people who truly care about me don't try to make me feel bad for having boundaries. So that's it? You're just going to abandon your family? I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm just refusing to be taken for granted anymore. There's a difference." Sophia hung up and sat in her car for a few more minutes, processing the conversation. Her phone immediately started buzzing with texts. First from Carlos, then Elena, then her father. All variations on the same theme: disappointment, guilt, accusations of selfishness. But for the first time in her life, Sophia felt completely at peace with disappointing them. She had work to do. 6 months later, Sophia stood in the floor-to-ceiling windows of her new corner office in the Willis Tower, watching the sunset over Lake Michigan. Green Thumb had just closed their Series C funding round, $45 million that would fuel their expansion into 15 new markets across the United States. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was now worth more than Carlos had ever dreamed of being, while his real estate empire had crumbled exactly as he'd predicted. Martinez Properties had filed for bankruptcy 3 months ago. Carlos and Lisa had been forced to sell their Lincoln Park house and move in with her parents temporarily while Carlos looked for work. Sofia had heard all of this through her mother, who had started calling her once a week, not to ask for anything, but simply to talk. It was a new dynamic for them, these conversations that weren't centered around family drama or obligations. Carmen had been attending therapy, something she'd mentioned casually during one of their calls, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I'm learning about codependency," she'd said. "Apparently, I've been enabling everyone in this family except the one person who actually had her life together." The changes in her family had been gradual but noticeable. Elena had started texting Sofia directly instead of only reaching out through their mother, not asking for anything, just sharing small moments from her life. A photo of her new garden, a funny story from work, an article she thought Sofia might find interesting. Her father had been the most surprising change of all. 2 weeks ago, he'd shown up at her office unannounced, looking uncomfortable in his best suit and carrying a small wrapped package. "I brought you something," he'd said, sitting awkwardly in her sleek conference room. "It's not much, but I thought you should have it." Inside the package was her grandfather's pocket watch, a family heirloom that traditionally passed to the eldest son. Roberto had given it to Carlos on his 21st birthday, following the family tradition. "Carlos sold it," her father had said quietly, "when he was trying to raise money to save the business. I bought it back from the pawn shop because I realized it should have gone to you in the first place. You're the one who's actually built something lasting." Sofia had been so stunned by the gesture that she'd barely been able to respond. Her father had never explicitly acknowledged her achievements before, let alone compared them favorably to Carlos's. Now, as she watched the city lights begin to twinkle in the growing darkness, Sofia felt the watch's weight in her pocket. Not the physical weight. It was surprisingly light for something so old. But the emotional weight of finally being seen by her father as worthy of the family legacy. Her phone buzzed with a text from David. "The Times reporter is here for your interview. Conference room B." Sofia smiled and headed toward the meeting. The New York Times was doing a feature story on female entrepreneurs who were disrupting traditional industries. The fact that they'd specifically sought her out still felt surreal, sometimes. The interview went well, covering everything from her company's mission to her plans for international expansion. But toward the end, the reporter asked a question that caught Sofia off guard. "You've built something remarkable here, but success can be isolating. How do you maintain relationships and community while running a demanding business?" Sofia considered the question carefully. 6 months ago, she might have given a different answer. Something about the sacrifices necessary for success, or the way business relationships could substitute for personal ones. "I think the key is distinguishing between people who value you as a person and people who value what you can do for them," she said finally. "I've learned that real community isn't about being needed by everyone. It's about being genuinely wanted by the right people." After the reporter left, Sofia stayed late in her office, working on the presentation for tomorrow's board meeting. Green Thumb's expansion into organic meal kits was ahead of schedule, and their partnership with local farms had created a sustainable supply chain that was being studied by other companies as a model for ethical business practices. Around 9 p.m., her phone rang with a call from an unknown Chicago number. Sofia almost didn't answer. She'd been getting more cold calls from investors and business development firms lately, but something made her pick up. Sofia Martinez. "Hi, Sofia. This is Jennifer Walsh from Second City Recovery Services. I'm calling about your brother, Carlos Martinez." Sofia's stomach dropped. "Is he okay? What happened?" "He's physically fine," Jennifer said quickly. "But he was arrested tonight for driving under the influence. He listed you as his emergency contact." Sofia closed her eyes, feeling the familiar weight of family crisis settling on her shoulders. But this time, instead of panic or immediate responsibility, she felt something different. Sadness, but also clarity. For a moment, She was transported back to when she was 16 and had gotten a similar call about Carlos after he'd been caught, drinking at a party. She'd lied to their parents about where she was and driven across town to pick him up, keeping his secret and taking the blame when their father noticed the car had been moved. She'd been protecting Carlos from consequences for over a decade. Ms. Walsh, I appreciate you calling me, but I'm not the right person to handle this situation. You should contact my parents, Roberto and Carmen Martinez. Sophia gave her the number. They live in Oak Park, and they're better positioned to help Carlos right now. Are you sure? He specifically asked for you, and said his parents wouldn't understand. The old Sophia would have melted at that appeal. Carlos needed her. He trusted her. He was counting on her to save him from embarrassment and consequences. But the new Sophia recognized the manipulation for what it was. I'm sure, she said firmly. Please call my parents. After hanging up, Sophia sat in her quiet office, processing the call. A year ago, she would have dropped everything to bail Carlos. Out of jail, probably would have driven him home and listened to him explain how this wasn't really his fault. She would have felt responsible for his problems and guilty for any boundaries she tried to set. Now, she felt sad for her brother, sad that his pride and poor decisions had led him to this point, but she didn't feel responsible for fixing it. The realization was both liberating and melancholy. Her phone buzzed with a text from Carlos, clearly sent before his arrest. Talked to Dad today. He says you won't even take my calls anymore. Pretty cold, even for you. Sophia stared at the message, feeling the familiar sting of being painted as the villain for refusing to enable bad behavior. But instead of the crushing guilt she would have felt months ago, she felt a strange sense of peace. Carlos was dealing with the consequences of his choices, and she was dealing with the consequences of hers. The difference was that her choices were finally serving her own best interests instead of everyone else's. Her phone rang again almost immediately. This time it was her mother. Sophia, Mija, the police called. Carlos is in jail. I know. The recovery service called me first. Can you... Carmen started to ask, then stopped herself. I'm sorry. I was about to ask if you could handle it, wasn't I? You were. And a year ago, I would have. But not now. Not now, Sophia confirmed. Mom, Carlos is a 40-year-old man who drove drunk and got arrested. That's not a family emergency. That requires my intervention. That's a consequence of his choices that he needs to face. There was a pause on the other end of the line. You're right. Your father and I will go get him. How are you doing with all of this? Sophia asked gently. Carmen sighed heavily. It's hard. In therapy, I'm learning that I've been protecting Carlos from consequences his whole life, and it hasn't helped him become a responsible adult. But watching him struggle, it goes against every instinct I have as a mother. The instinct to protect your children isn't wrong, Mom. But protecting someone from the consequences of their actions isn't really protecting them. It's just postponing the lesson they need to learn. When did you become so wise? Sophia smiled, looking out at the city lights. When I finally learned the difference between being helpful and being used. They talked for a few more minutes about lighter topics. Carmen's new hobby of watercolor painting, Roberto's latest attempt at growing, tomatoes in the backyard, Elena's promotion at work. These conversations with her mother had become one of Sophia's favorite parts of the week. They were finally getting to know each other as adults, separate from family drama and obligations. Oh, before I forget, Carmen said as they were wrapping. Up the call, Elena mentioned that her friend Maria is looking for a new job. She has experience in marketing and speaks 3 languages. I told Elena I'd ask if you're hiring. Sophia paused, recognizing the old pattern. A family member had a need, and Sophia was expected to provide the solution. But Carmen's tone was different, this time. More like a friend passing along a networking opportunity than a mother expecting her daughter to solve someone else's problem. Have Elena send me Maria's resume? Sophia said. I can't promise anything, but we're always looking for good marketing talent. I'll tell her. And Sophia? Thank you for not automatically saying yes. I know that sounds strange, but I'm proud of you for considering what's best for your business first. After they hung up, Sophia felt a warm glow of satisfaction. Her mother was proud of her for setting boundaries, not for sacrificing her own interests. The shift in their dynamic still felt miraculous sometimes. Sophia finished her presentation and prepared to head home. As she waited for the elevator, she thought about how different her life looked now compared to 6 months ago. She'd lost the family dynamics she'd grown up with, but she'd gained something more valuable: authentic relationships built on mutual respect rather than obligation. Her weekly calls with her mother felt like conversations between two adults who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Elena had started inviting her to lunch occasionally, not because she needed something, but because she wanted to spend time with her sister. The elevator arrived, and as Sophia stepped inside, she noticed her reflection in the polished steel doors. She looked confident, successful, at peace with herself in a way that had nothing to do with her bank account or her company's valuation. There was something in her posture, in the set of her shoulders, that spoke of someone who had learned her own worth and refused to accept anything less than respect. Even her relationship with Carlos was evolving, though more slowly. He'd been angry with her for months after she'd refused to invest in his company, but lately, his texts had taken on a different tone. Last week, he'd sent her a simple message. Saw the Forbes article about Green Thumb. Really proud of you, sis. Wasn't an apology, but it was progress. And Sophia had learned to appreciate progress over perfection, especially when it came to family relationships. Her phone buzzed with a text from David. Great interview today. Want to grab dinner to celebrate the Times feature? Sophia smiled and typed back. Can't tonight. I'm cooking dinner for someone special. The someone special was herself. Over the past few months, Sophia had started a new tradition. Every Friday night, she cooked an elaborate meal just for her own enjoyment. She'd light candles, pour a good glass of wine, and sit at her dining table with a book or some music, celebrating the simple pleasure of her own company. It had taken her 26 years to realize that she was worth celebrating. Back in her apartment, Sophia changed into comfortable clothes and surveyed her kitchen. Tonight's menu was ambitious: homemade pasta with a mushroom ragu that required 3 hours of slow simmering, fresh bread that she'd started that morning, and a chocolate soufflé for dessert. As she began preparing the mise en place, Sophia's phone rang one more time. The caller ID showed Elena, sister. Hey, Elena. Sophia, I heard about Carlos. Are you okay? The question caught Sophia off guard. Instead of assuming she'd handle the crisis or asking her to help, Elena was checking on her emotional well-being. I'm okay, Sophia said, surprised by how true it felt. Sad for Carlos, but okay. Good. I just wanted you to know that if you need to talk about it, I'm here. No agenda, no family politics, just sister to sister. Sophia felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you. That means more than you know. I know I haven't been the best sister over the years, Elena continued. I was so caught up in my own drama that I never really paid attention to what you were going through. But I see it now, and I'm sorry. Elena, let me finish. I want you to know that I'm proud of you. Not just for your success, but for how you've handled all the family stuff. You've been graceful about setting boundaries, and you've forced all of us to grow up a little bit. I know it wasn't your job to teach us how to treat you better, but I'm grateful that you did. Sophia had to sit down on her kitchen stool, overwhelmed by the sincerity in her sister's voice. I love you too, Elena. Good. Now go enjoy your Friday night. I know you've got some fancy cooking project planned. After they hung up, Sophia stood in her kitchen, looking around at the ingredients spread across her counters. 6 months ago, she'd been eating takeout alone most nights, too busy with work to take care of herself properly. Now, she had a sister who knew her well enough to remember her cooking hobby, parents who called just to check in, and a business that was thriving because she'd learned to set healthy boundaries in all areas of her life. As the pasta dough came together under her hands, Sophia thought about the dinner that had started this whole journey. The family gathering she hadn't been invited to. The moment that had finally forced her to confront the truth about her relationships. She'd been so hurt by that empty chair, so focused on the rejection and the loneliness. But now she realized that empty chair had been a gift. It had shown her exactly where she stood with her family, which had given her the clarity to decide where she wanted to stand. Tonight, she was setting a table for one, but it wasn't lonely. It was intentional. It was self-respectful. It was the table where she honored her own worth, celebrated her own achievements, and enjoyed her own company. And somehow, learning to fill that single chair with confidence and self-love had made room for better relationships with everyone else. As Sophia lit the candles and poured herself a glass of wine, she raised her glass to the empty chairs around her table. Not because they represented loneliness, but because they represented choice. The choice to surround herself only with people who valued her presence, respected her boundaries, and celebrated her success. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Your father and I got Carlos home safely. Thank you for not making his problems your emergency. I'm learning that loving someone sometimes means letting them face their consequences." Sophia smiled and texted back, "Love you too, Mom. See you Sunday for dinner?" "We'd love that. Should I make your favorite dessert? Only if you want to. I'll be there either way." And that, Sophia realized, was the difference. She'd be there either way. Not because she had to be, not because she was afraid of disappointing anyone, but because she wanted to be there. Because she'd finally found her place at the family table, and it was a place she'd chosen rather than one that had been assigned to her. As Sophia sat down to her perfectly prepared meal, she thought about the girl she'd been 6 months ago, desperate for approval, terrified of disappointing anyone, willing to set herself on fire to keep others warm. That girl was gone, replaced by a woman who knew her own worth and insisted that others recognize it too. The pasta was perfect, the wine was excellent, and the company, her own, was exactly what she needed. But as she savored her homemade meal, Sophia's mind wandered to the broader implications of her journey. She'd built a successful company, but more importantly, she'd rebuilt herself. The two accomplishments were intertwined in ways she was only beginning to understand. Her phone buzzed with an email notification. Usually, she'd ignore work messages during her Friday night ritual, but this one caught her attention. It was from TechCrunch, asking for her comment on a breaking news story. Sophia opened the article and felt her stomach drop. The headline read, "Martinez Properties files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, founder Carlos Martinez arrested for DUI." The article detailed Carlos's business failures and included a mugshot from his arrest earlier that evening. For a moment, Sophia felt the old familiar pang of responsibility. Should she reach out to Carlos? Offer to help with damage control? Issue a statement distancing her company from his troubles? But then she set her phone aside and took another sip of wine. Carlos's problems were not hers to solve. His poor decisions were not her responsibility to clean up. And his reputation was not hers to manage. The realization was both liberating and sad. She loved her brother, but she couldn't save him from himself. Her phone rang almost immediately. The caller ID showed Dad. "Hi, Papa. Sophia, mija, I'm sure you've seen the news." "I have. This is going to be hard on the family. He's struggling more than we realized." Sophia heard the unspoken question in her father's voice. The old Roberto would have expected her to step in, to use her success and connections to help minimize the damage to the family reputation. "Yes, he is struggling," Sophia agreed. "And I hope he gets the help he needs." There was a pause. "The reporters might come to you for comment. What will you say?" that my brother and I run separate businesses, and I wish him well in resolving his personal and professional challenges. That's it? That's it, Dad. I'm not going to throw him under the bus, but I'm also not going to sacrifice my company's reputation to protect his. Another pause. Longer this time. 6 months ago, I would have been angry at you for not helping. More. But your mother's therapy sessions have been educational. She's helped me understand some things about how we've treated you over the years. Sophia nearly choked on her wine. Her father was acknowledging their family dysfunction voluntarily, without prompting. What kind of things? That we raised you to believe love was conditional on usefulness. That we taught you to set yourself on fire to keep everyone else warm, as your mother puts it. And that when you finally learned to stop doing that, we called you selfish instead of recognizing that you were finally being healthy. Sophia felt tears prick her eyes. Dad, I'm proud of you, mija. Not just for your business success, but for having the strength to break patterns that have been in our family for generations. Carlos never learned to face consequences because we always had you there to soften them. Elena never learned to solve her own problems because she always had you to fix them. And your mother and I never learned to support you properly because you seemed so capable of handling everything alone. I wasn't alone, Sophia said quietly. I was just afraid that if I asked for help, you'd realize I wasn't as valuable as I thought. Ay, mija. You were the most valuable person in our family, and we treated you like you were the least important. They talked for another 30 minutes. The longest conversation Sophia had ever had with her father that wasn't about family crises or obligations. Roberto told her about how he'd started attending some of Carmen's therapy sessions, how they were learning to see their children as independent adults rather than extensions of themselves. Your mother wants to know if you're still coming to Sunday dinner this week, he said as they wrapped up the call. Are you cooking or is she? We're making it together. Your mother's teaching me how to make her abuela's tamales. Sophia smiled at the image of her traditionally machismo father learning to cook alongside her mother. I'll be there, but I might be a little late. I have a video call with some potential investors in Japan at noon. Japan? Mija, that's incredible. Yeah, we're looking at expanding into the Asian markets. The demand for sustainable food sourcing is huge over there. You're going to conquer the world, aren't you? Sophia laughed, feeling a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the wine. One farmer-to-table connection at a time. After they hung up, Sophia returned to her meal, but her appetite had been replaced by a different kind of satisfaction. Her family was finally learning to see her as a whole person, not just a resource to be managed. It had taken a crisis and a lot of therapy, but they were getting there. Her phone buzzed with another notification, this time from Elena. Saw the news about Carlos. Are you doing okay? Do you want to talk? Sophia texted back, I'm okay, thank you for asking. How are you holding up? Sad for Carlos, but not surprised. I think we all saw this coming. Mom and Dad are handling it well considering. They're not expecting you to fix it, which is progress. It really is. Want to get lunch tomorrow? I have some news I want to share. Sophia felt a flutter of anxiety. In her family, news usually meant someone needed something, but Elena's tone seemed genuinely excited rather than needy. Good news. Or bad news? Good news. Really good news. But I want to tell you in person. Okay, I'm intrigued. Noon at that place on Rush Street? Perfect. And Sophia? Thanks for teaching us all how to have healthier relationships. I know it wasn't your job, but I'm grateful anyway. As Sophia finished her dinner, she reflected on how much had changed in just 6 months. She'd started the year feeling invisible and undervalued, desperately trying to earn a place at a table that didn't appreciate her presence. Now she was setting her own table, choosing her own company, and building relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been lonely nights when she'd questioned whether standing up for herself was worth the conflict it created. There had been moments when the old patterns felt safer than the uncertainty of change. But sitting in her beautiful apartment, surrounded by the fruits of her own labor and success, Sophia knew she'd made the right choice. She'd traded the illusion of belonging for the reality of self-respect, and it had made all the difference. Her phone remained quiet for the rest of the evening, and Sophia couldn't have been happier about it. She had work to do, dreams to chase, and a life to live. A life that belonged entirely to her. For the first time in her life, Sophia Martinez was exactly where she belonged. At a table she'd set for herself, celebrating achievements she'd earned, surrounded by the quiet confidence that came from finally knowing she was enough. And tomorrow, she'd wake up and do it all again. Not because she had to prove her worth to anyone, but because she was building something meaningful with her life, something that reflected her values, her vision, and her determination to create positive change in the world. Her family would always be part of her story, but they were no longer the authors of her chapters. She was writing her own narrative, now, and it was turning out to be quite an adventure, and that was more than enough.